I've never had so much fun as I've had with you guys.
Okay, folks, so welcome back to Two in the Hand. This is our second ever episode, and we'd like to begin by sincerely thanking you all for the feedback that we received over the last week or two. I think I can speak for all of the lads here when I say that we were truly overwhelmed by the positive response. Would you agree, boys?
Yeah, we've got a great response. We did put a lot of work in, but it's been worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very much so. In fact, I'd even say that you have inspired us to go out and get more footage to bring the show to you on a little bit more of a regular basis than we intended. So you've only got yourselves to blame for what's coming next. So today we only have two topics. We're going to look at our recent birding, and we're going to look at current affairs. Looking at some of the feedback that we received, we've seen that that is what you guys want to see, so we're going to give it to you. So we're going to begin this week by looking at this week's birding and what we've got up to and what we've achieved over the week that's gone by. Okay. So the first bird that we're going to talk about is actually a little bit of a sore spot for me, all right? And it stems from the end of the vlog that we had in last week's episode, okay? So I ended it on quite a positive note with us connecting with the wood sandpiper and getting some crippling views and great footage and all those wonderful things. But I left out the absolute heartbreak that was me missing out on a Caspian Tern, okay? So which one of you heathens want to tell this story?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'll just to say first, I mean, I don't know what all the bother is about Caspian Tern. I mean, John, why would you be worried about such a thing?
Yeah, it's very, very true. It seems all the dirt birders have them, to be fair. Like, it seems all the casual birders have the Caspian Tern at this moment.
I mean, to be fair to you, John, they seem to turn up every 3 or 4 or 5 years, but they can be very difficult to connect with.
Was the Tecumseh bird that you got, Peter?
Yeah, I was very lucky a few years ago. I happened to be holidaying in Wexford, and news came of 2 citrine wagtails at the east end of Tecumseh, which were a tick for me, and I went to see them, and I was delighted. I was just taking some photographs of them, and another birder, Paul Kelly, rang me. He was literally about 500 yards from me. He rang me to say he had a Caspian Tern, and I could actually I turned the scope around, and I could see the bird amongst the herring gulls, the big red stonking bill on it. It was great. It really was.
And it is a stonking bill.
Yeah, I see you're smiling, Brian. Anyway, you're obviously on the Caspian list, are you?
Will I tell the story what happened, John?
No, I think we just skip over it and go straight to the other story. Like, to be honest, the people don't want to hear this, Brian. People don't want to know about this. I think, I think there's no point reliving my pain in public. But if that's what you see us want to do, then fire away. Go, Brian.
Yeah.
Go.
So what happened was, after the vlog was shot, we were arriving back into Drogheda after an agonising journey back in the camper, and I just got a notification. I have an awful lot of Irish birders on Twitter with notifications turned on, so I'm able to see news breaking straight away. And Stephen King retweeted Kerry birder Pat McDade that he had just found a Caspian Tern on Inny Strand, which is near Ballinskelligs in County Kerry. And again, almost like every time news of a rare bird breaks, you try to figure out how can you get off work or how can you cancel the plans that are already. It's the worst bit about twitching. But
just for some context, folks, this happened on the evening, late enough in the evening of a Monday of a bank holiday weekend.
Yeah, so it was 8 o'clock the news broke that evening.
8 o'clock. So think, just for some context, myself, Jer and Brian were after spending 2 to 3 days in the camper van, birding our hearts out trying to find that rare bird, and more importantly, available to go anywhere in the country to see that bird. But yet, we were back in Louth when the news broke. On a Monday evening, work the next day, responsibilities, all that crap that nobody likes. Let's just say I was gutted because I couldn't go. I must say, McCluskey, I'll never thank you enough for not rubbing it in, because you.
No, I wouldn't do that
when he was down there.
Have I told you about the stonking red bill?
I'm okay about it now, but I drove from Drogheda to Monaghan in about 7 minutes. So to say I was unhappy is an understatement. But so what happened was we were just pulling into Drogheda. We were going at the fastest we had driven to that point, which was 34 miles an hour, and the news broke. And as Brian was saying, plans were made, and poor John had to go back to Monaghan. What happened next? What did the abandoners, or one half of the abandoners do?
Yeah, well, so I was due into work the next evening. So I knew a Twitch was kind of off the cards without me trying to get off. So I rang the same part-timer to cover me for the brown booby. And I was like, is there any chance?
Brian, he must have been exhausted, was he?
That guy
so
thinks
thankfully he said
chronic illness, like, or something. He thinks he was chronic diarrhea or something, so he does.
Yeah, no, because I had told him that I was down in Wexford, but that I told him then that I was staying an extra day, so it was grand, like it was grand. So myself and Jer Murray, we headed down. We arrived back in the house probably about 8:30. Went into Jer's house, got a bite to eat, and by 10:30 we were on the road for Kerry. So literally no sleep. The plan was to be there for dawn as it was getting bright, and be out to hopefully see it leaving the roost, because it was seen roosting on the beach. But of course, like, the back of my mind, I was thinking it roosted on the beach, but high tide would shift it off the beach. So all this was kind of playing in my mind, and knowing how unusual it is for Caspian Terns to hang around in Ireland.
Brian, how rare is Caspian Tern, just to let people know?
So there's 12 records, and I think all but 1 or 2 have hung around more than one day. So that, like, they're incredibly difficult to connect with.
So it would be a much sought after bird for Twitchers.
Absolutely. The last one that hung around was 1988 in Ballycotton, which an awful lot of Irish lads would have seen. But I didn't know whether we were mad in the head or not. We probably were anyway. But we were heading down, barely met a car on the road. We arrived at Innistrand, I'm trying to think, it was probably just after 3 o'clock. And
in the morning.
Just 3 o'clock in the morning, middle of the night. And set the alarm for, I think it was 4:45, put the head back, could not sleep. Not for the life of me, couldn't sleep. Because I knew, like, you could hear kind of gulls and that outside, and I was just thinking the Caspian Tern could literally have been just flying past us in the middle of the night, like, without us knowing. Because high tide, I think,
Brian, did Jer not bring his lamp? No? Didn't bring his lamp.
Lamper in the camper.
Yeah, that's all right. That's a strange one. He's usually got some sort of high-powered torch on him, but okay.
But anyway, so as it was kind of getting bright, very, very slowly, a terrible mist or fog starts rolling in, and it was so thick.
It sounds like a clip out of Sherlock Holmes.
We're certainly 2 good candidates for the Hound of the Baskervilles anyway, but fair enough. On we go.
So and then heavy rain started, and myself and Jer, we were joined by another birder, Hubert Servin. So he lives in Kerry, and he had already been there. He had the same idea as us to be there for dawn. So all 3 of us just wandered down in the pitch black, and started scanning, making out shapes. You could see gulls flying through, and eventually, as it started to get bright, a couple of med gulls and a few juveniles flew through, which I think are quite an okay bird for Kerry. Well, that far down anyway. And as about 6:30, myself and Jer, I had already rang a couple of lads had rang me asking for news. They knew we were there for dawn, and I had to give them the bad news that there was no sign of the tern, and that the tide would have moved it off. So it was looking bad straight from the get go. But thankfully, Jer Murray, just like a small flock of common gulls appeared on the other side of the estuary, and Jer just turned around and said, "Just keep checking those. It could pop in." And I had literally just checked that flock a couple of minutes previous, and I just spun the scope around, and bang in the centre was Caspian Tern. Couldn't believe it. I roared over to
Brian, how did you recognise it?
By its stonking red bill. So couldn't believe it. Roared over to Jer Murray, and Jer came running over, got it in the scope. Hubert had walked further down to the outflow, rang him. He came running up as well, got it in the scope. We watched it for about 10 minutes in the thick mist. Like the shots in the PowerPoint there, I got those through the scope, so you can see the black underwing of the primaries and things like that. But the views were quite good, but it's just a pity about the mist. And what happened was then, one by one, the common gulls started to get up the far side and fly towards the sea. And the Caspian Tern eventually was the last bird to get up and took a short run up and just took to the air. It was absolutely when Jer I don't think he was watching at the time when it started flying, and he was like, where is it? And the gulls were right beside us, and it was just monstrous compared to the rest of them. It was really big, and it just gave a quick flyby really close, about maybe 10 or 20 meters out, and Jer got quite good flight shots. And I followed it in the scope as a speck out. It went straight out to sea, and I was thinking that could be that. But a couple of birders, Paul Borden and a couple of other lads arrived. Pat McDade, the finder, the hero Pat, he arrived, and no sign. About an hour later, at 7:30, I picked it up. It was flying back in over our heads towards the estuary, and I just banked around the corner. I was saying it'll be just sitting up here in the mud. No, that was it. That was the last it was seen in Ireland anyway.
Brian,
yeah.
They're a big bird. Are they the biggest tern in Europe?
They're the biggest tern, yeah. So Royal Tern would kind of come close, but Caspian is bigger. But
Royal Tern's an American species, isn't it?
Royal Tern, yeah, American or African, yeah. So it banked around the corner. Everybody came running up, hoping to see it, and it wasn't on the mud. So I was thinking, like, where could it have went? Like, because there was only it was a big enough bay, kind of an estuary, but no sign. There was a couple of Sanders tern and plenty of common gulls sitting out on the mud. And actually, it was mental, because I picked up a storm petrel flying over the mud, like almost like it was a wader, and it hung around for a couple of hours, which was nice to see. But still no sign of the Caspian Tern, and plenty of lads from Dublin and further came down to twitch it, and it didn't show, unfortunately. But later that evening, I remember Josh Jones and Niall Keogh, I was discussing on WhatsApp with those. Fair play to them, they copped us that a Caspian Tern turned up in Wales, and that it was showing certain similarities to the Kerry bird. And I was thinking, like, surely that's probably too much of a distance, like 350 kilometers in 10 hours or so. But sure enough, Jer's pictures showed that it was indeed the same bird, with the same differences on the primaries.
Wow.
And on the wing, which is mental. Like, yeah,
that's amazing. So that bird probably got lost, maybe over the Atlantic, maybe made landfall on the western seaboard of Ireland, rested overnight, and then realised it was in the wrong location, and kind of reorientated itself and headed back east into Europe, where they're from.
Because Caspian terns in Europe, they migrate over land, so it's quite likely that that's why we saw it last heading inland, that it probably just went straight over the mountains and out the other side. So
That's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Which is fucking like it's amazing, like, you know.
Yeah, it's fantastic. To be honest with you, it really does add to the mystique of the bird, and kind of makes me want to catch up with one again, because
the only thing is there will be more Caspian Terns. Like, it's just it needs
to be. John, they'll only hang around for a few hours as well, so you won't see them either.
You'll never see that stonking red bill.
You know what? Fair play to you. That was a splendid rendition of the story, Brian. I'm massively impressed with the fact that you managed to leave the bit where you and Jer flushed the bird out. I think that was masterful storytelling. We should call you the Bard McCluskey.
John, don't be so bitter.
Just to explain to people what flushing means, in case they think it's a plumbing term. In a birding context, to flush the bird is to, either intentionally or accidentally, scare the bird, and the bird flies up and flies off.
Yeah.
And I remember once, I think there was a bird watcher in England, and I think his name might have been Gordon, and he was well known for flushing birds, and he got the nickname Flush Gordon after the superhero. So
yeah, but the only thing is, that bird, no matter how close we wanted to get, it was impossible to get, because an estuary was separating us from the birds.
Yeah, funny. The first time the estuary makes an appearance in the story, but yeah, fair enough. No, in all seriousness, there, as Peter has said, being a flusher is something that no birder wants to be accused of, and in fact, it's something that a lot of truly bitter lads who've missed out on a bird will often level at people who connected with it out of sheer anger. But more power to the lads, and I'm delighted that he connected.
Cheers, son.
Still the best birds in Ireland to have seen are Tawny Pipit and Golden Oriole, but Caspian Tern is up there.
It's up there,
yeah.
John, it'll have to be on your most wanted list.
Oh, it is indeed.
John, you should find out if there's one in the museum. You can put it on yours.
Stick it on your stuffed list, John.
Yeah, fair enough. I feel that this is unnecessary ribbing, and we're going to move on. I also have the power to mute yous as well, so be quiet, all right? No, that was the story of the Caspian Tern and how I missed out on it, and how the lads connected with it. That's fantastic. So, fair play to them. Not bitter in the slightest. The second kind of cool bird that we went for this week in Ireland is the stone curlew, or as we affectionately call it, the stony. So I'm going to introduce the story to you a little bit. What had happened on that particular day, or that fateful day, was Brian and I and Peter had arranged to go and see the Forster's Tern in Soldiers Point, Dock. So I think it was about 3:30. I drove directly into Brian's house, and I pulled up the handbrake. As I pulled up the handbrake, my phone rang on the car kit, and it was Brian McCluskey. And I says, "What's going on here?" I answered the phone. I goes, "Well, you Div, I'm outside." I was expecting them to be trying to sort that fringe out or whatever it is that he'd be doing when I'm waiting outside for him to come out first thing in the morning and all these things. But,
John,
yeah.
it's a stonking fringe.
It covers up that 5 head of his, but anyway. So I'm just jealous. I'm going to comb the beard up eventually, but anyway. So I literally just pulled up outside Brian's house. The car was still turned on, and he rang me. He goes, John, where are you, John? And I said, Brian, I'm outside. What are you ringing me for, you did? He says, John, there's a stone curlew in Wicklow. And I go, get away. I didn't believe him, because I never believe Brian. He's compulsive. But anyway, he said there is, and I says, right, well, come on. And the thing that was kind of slowing us down was that I had kind of volunteered to kind of give Brian a little bit of a driving lesson that day. So he had all his stuff in his car, or his mum and dad's car. So we had to transfer that stuff over, and then we hit the road. Now, You're not going to like to hear this, Peter Phillips, right? You're not going to like to hear this at all. But we were on the M50 before we remembered you. Okay. And I feel incredibly bad about that, and I always will. But sometimes when birds arrive, they take precedence and people get left behind. Clip.
John, sometimes when rare birds turn up, it's every man for himself.
And you can't get too annoyed because you previously just said that. But anyway, Peter was standing at the side of the road at Soldiers Point, and we were motoring our way towards the bird. Couldn't get him. I don't know where your phone was. I don't know what was happening. And we drove on anyway. We picked up Jer, and we arrived in Feeling Light. What happened next, Brian?
Yeah, well, we arrived down. We got Jer. We arrived down. And I legged it from the car. I left those in a cloud of smoke too. And I ran the whole way to the breaches, which is it the breaches? It's called the Buckthorn, I think it's called actually. And I thought I was going to pass out by the time I got there. It's a long run on on sand, and
it's the guts of a kilometre. It has to be the guts of a kilometre.
Yeah, and with wellies and scope and that, it wasn't. But I arrived 5 or 6 minutes before the lads, and that's when it showed the best. No.
5 or 6 minutes, me whole. You were there about 3 minutes.
More,
3 minutes max. 3 minutes max.
5 or 6
3 minutes max.
Minimum.
I'd have been there quicker, only had to pick up all the old ladies you knocked over on the way up there. So just be quiet, all right? Anyway.
Yeah, so he ran up, and I think it was Ian Stevenson, I think, had it in the scope.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember exactly whose scope. I think it was Ian's, and I looked in and I couldn't see it. I was expecting it to be just sitting like right in front, like in the foreground. Eventually I got it. It was sitting way at the back in the field, and you could just see the head and neck of the stone curlew. It was obvious what it was. But apparently it had flown a couple of minutes previous or something, and it was actually showing quite close, but we only managed fairly distant views. My shots there in the PowerPoint are taken through the scope with the phone again. So that's kind of
Well, you say distant views, Brian. Like, I could see the yellow ring in the eye. I could make up the yellow.
Yeah, no, you could see everything. Yeah, it's just.
I thought there were good views, but as you say, we wanted to see it fly. And for those of you who aren't familiar with a stone curlew, probably the coolest thing about the bird are that its knees hinge forward. So the way we kind of, I'm not demonstrating.
Go on, John.
I refuse to demonstrate that.
John,
we know how knees work.
Roll up your trousers, John, and show us. Go on.
Peter, look, the last time we were on a webcam and you said that to me, no, all right? Anyway, we all know how knees work. Well, imagine a knee that bends forward like this. It's quite a cool thing to see. And I really wanted to see that because it's got this great donkey yellow legs as well. We didn't. But I think I was happy. I was happy to connect with the bird. I was very, very happy to see it. Never mind see it so well. I would say that was pretty good. We didn't get the best views, but we got decent views. So
and do you know what, John?
Yeah.
I was very happy you connected with it.
Oh, I'd say you were, Peter. And I was not at all smug when we did finally actually we did get you on the phone. We were like, oh, hello, Peter Phillips. Oh, it's yourself, is it? Stuff like that was said. And then I was, Peter, in all honesty, I answered the phone with Peter. I said, Peter, where are you? What's going on here? Because we have a little bit of competitive element between us here. But at the end of the day, we're mates. We want each other to get the bird. So I was gutted when we couldn't get through. Said, where are you, Peter? He says, I'm at Soldiers Point waiting on you. And basically I goes, Peter, we're in Wicklow looking at a stone curlew, for God's sake. And Peter was like, did you get it? And I said, yeah. He says, well done, lads. And that is as good an indication of the man's character as I can give you. He was delighted for us, even though he'd missed it himself. But did you ever hear that story about keeping an old dog down? It's pretty hard to do. And Peter proved that yet again. The next day, well, look, I'm not going to tell you about it. Let's watch a bit of footage of the next day and how Peter got on.
Latest news from the stone curlew twitches. Bird hasn't been seen in a while. It's hidden behind a hill. And there's been no sign of it. So we keep going and keep the Dave, the stone curlew, what's the story? Where is it? Is it gone into hiding? Who's up there at the moment?
Seamus Feeney.
And has it been seen in a while?
Hasn't been seen for about an hour. Just sat down in the grass. It keeps running into little hollows, you know.
Yeah.
But they're a nighttime bird now. They're
Not too active during the day.
He was active this morning.
Right.
But as the day went on, as the day is going on, he's getting quieter and quieter. But the Seamus Feeney's up in the middle of the buckthorn.
Yeah.
Because you can look down into the field.
Get a better view.
Better view, yeah.
I better head on. What are you eating? What's that?
Beetroot and sweet and sour sauce with chicken.
Lovely. And what's that you're drinking?
Tea, black tea. No
Good
milk,
man.
no sugar.
You're sweet enough. Listen, I better go. Thanks a million, Dave. Just on my way down to the sea buckthorn. See if I can get a view of this bird. It's not looking good. What's the guys behind something? Have a look again. No chance. Any look, mate? Give us a look and I'll tell you if I can. Oh, I do have. He's in the foreground, he's in the first clump and he looks pale grey. He's sitting down. Yeah, probably look at half it. He's in the foreground, he's in the first. You see him? You see the piece of white fluff? Just look to the right of the fluff. You see him? It'll do, Seamus, it's a tick. Come on, Seamus, thank you. Seamus, you made my day. Fair play to you. I'm glad you got it. I'm not surprised you couldn't see it. Soil's red. That's where the bird is. Better. Well, I'm a happy twitcher. Happy stone curlew. John and Brian, all is forgiven.
Okay, Peter, so congratulations are in order. You clawed that one back in epic style. And more importantly, you showed the nation what Davy Fox takes in his sandwiches. And that's the question that we all wanted answered. So it is. That should have been on prime time, man. Well done. But that being said, that's as much as we're going to talk about, because that's as much content we have for this week's birding that we got up to. What we're going to move on to now is to the second half of this week's show. And we're going to discuss current affairs. Okay? Now, this is a little bit out of date, I will admit. Time has progressed since we got the photos of this bird and since this bird was seen. And what we're going to basically look at first is the Caspian Tern, which is the first for Europe, found at Ladies Island in Wexford by Jim Dowd. Okay. For a bit of context, for those of you who may not have seen the bird, it's very, very similar to a sandwich tern, but with an all-yellow bill. And there are some very, very finer details that separate the species as well, all right? This bird showed up when, Brian?
It was June of this year, so.
Yeah, it was June of this year. Those of you with better memories will remember that that was right in the middle of lockdown. We're not going to talk too much about that. But this is a potential first for Europe with a little bit of adversity in that it was being dismissed as it was being dismissed as a barrent sandwich tern, okay, or an barrent sandwich tern, excuse me, which means basically a sandwich tern with a bit of a funky bill, okay. It was being written off.
What happened was Victor Cachera, he rang me, and I can't remember what day it was. It was evening anyway when he rang me, and he just said there's a potential first for the Western Pal in Wexford. But he said that there was a couple of possibilities of what it could have been, either a hybrid sandwich cross with a yellow-billed or orange-billed tern. It could have been an unusual-looking sandwich tern, or it could have been a KN tern. So on hearing this, I was half thinking if it was a hybrid elegant cross with a sandwich tern, I'd love to see that, even though it's only a hybrid. So I rang John.
You can't tick it being the relevance there, folks. You can't count it on your list, despite the fact that it could still have a fairly significant origin as well, like, you know, so it could be a special bird anyway. But
yeah, but I wouldn't have minded having seen that, and I kind of dismissed Caspian Tern completely on the first day. So I rang John and I just said, look, there's a unusual tern down in Wexford if you want to go. Neither of us could go the next day. I couldn't get off work, so 2 days later, I think it was the Sunday, we went down. And we arrived at Ladies Island, not expecting much. We left the house at something like 9 o'clock in the morning, just strolled, like kind of took our time getting down to Wexford. No big panic to see this bird. Yeah,
I believe I stopped to pick up some fish.
You did, yeah.
I bought some koi on the way down the road.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, we got to Ladies Island, and Vic, he was already on site, so he had seen it a couple of times that morning, so at least we knew it was still there. Mm-hmm. Again, I was in no mad panic to see it or anything. And then Jim Dowdle, the finder, he arrived, and he was only on site a couple of minutes, and he picked it up, and it was buried in amongst the sandwich terns, and every so often it would stick the head up. And eventually I did see it, but it was quite poor.
Just to say, the bird was actually frequenting an island that the sandwich terns were nesting on. There's a huge colony of terns. I think there's a couple of thousand pairs nest on the islands just off Ladies Island. And this bird had seemed to have paired up with a sandwich tern, so it looked like it was hanging around and possibly going to breed at the site.
Yeah, so Jim picked it up and I got the views, and the views were quite distant and in heat haze, and I wasn't overly impressed by it at all. I didn't really know what to make of it. And I actually then went up to Yeartick Rosie a turn, and I returned then Victor, or I think it was actually John, I think you rang me to say that it flew out onto the shore. So when I heard that it was on the shore, only a short scope view across, I ran back down and got it in the scope, and I just thought it couldn't be. It was paired up. It was obviously paired up with a male sandwich tern. They were mating, and the size difference straight away was incredibly striking. The same size difference wasn't evident in male and female sandwich terns that were there, but this bird was tiny compared to the male sandwich tern. The other thing was on a few stills. It was only until actually a couple of days later, Aidan Kelly got really nice shots, phone scope video of it, and you could see a dark secondary bar, which is a big feature for Cabot's tern. I think it was Martin Garner picked that feature out when he was doing a piece on Cabot's and sandwich terns.
American species of tern, folks.
Yeah, it's the American equivalent of sandwich tern, which is now split, and KN tern is a subspecies of Cabot's, if that makes sense.
So some quite tricky stuff here, folks. So you're dealing with separate species and subspecies of separate species as well. Okay.
Yeah,
not the easiest identification.
I might just mention that, as Brian said there a couple of minutes ago, sandwich tern was the species that was, if you like, described first, and they thought that they were all one species, if you like. So the European version is sandwich tern, the North American version is cabots, and then the kind of South American, Central American version is Caspian Tern. So they were all kind of lumped, is what's called. They were all considered one species, although there was a few differences between them. But recently they were split, so scientists have decided that in fact there's enough genetic differences between them that they warrant complete species status between Europe and America. So that's where kind of the interest has certainly been piqued among European birders, because now Cabot's tern and Caspian tern are tickable in a European context.
Yeah, and just to put Cabot's tern into context for Western polyarctic birders, there's been 2 previous records of Cabot's. One was, I think the first record was in Britain, and it was actually a ringed sandwich tern at the time, and it was found inland in a forest, and the ring was from North America, so it was a Cabot's tern. And then there was another record.
That bird was found dead, Brian, was it?
It was found dead. That one was found dead. I can't remember was the Dutch bird dead or alive, but as far as I know, that was ringed as well. And they're the only 2 records. There was a very, very good candidate photographed. I think it was around 2009 on the Azores, and that was almost certainly a Cabot's tern, but it was never submitted. So other than that, there has been no Cabot's terns. So this would be the 3rd Cabot's tern and the first Caspian tern. Again, if that makes sense. I
think probably one of the reasons why people were disbelieving at the start, because it seems like such an unusual vagrant in terms of, like, there are some species that you expect to turn up in Europe that maybe, but migration might suggest that they would turn up occasionally. But Caspian tern, I think, was completely off the radar.
But you see, that's the bit that bugged me, because you'd surely think that Caspian tern is a more likely vagrant than elegant tern. Like elegant tern is West Coast rather than the Atlantic.
So for some context there, folks, the elegant tern would be showing up on the West Coast, whereas the Caspian would be showing up all the way down, actually, the east coast of South America, I believe. So very far distances.
Caspian tern is a bird that's actually frequents the Atlantic. It's the same ocean that we have, whereas the elegant is in the Pacific Ocean, so their migration route would keep them on the far side of the Americas. So as Brian was suggesting, you would think that possibly they might be a less likely candidate. But I think Caspian tern, I don't think it's a long distance migrant. So I think initially they bred in South America, and I think it was only the 1980s they started breeding in the Caribbean. I think they're fairly recent, so only the last 20 or 30 years. And I think there's probably been some hybridization between them and Cabot's tern in recent years. So as the population moves north, they're mixing more with Cabot's tern, the North American version. And that's probably going to confuse matters in years to come, because you might end up with birds appearing over this side of the Atlantic that are actually a cross between the 2 North American terns, which will make things even more confusing than they already are.
Mm-hmm.
But a slight theory I kind of thought of how it turned up here is it possibly got caught up in a storm last autumn and was blown maybe across the South Atlantic towards Africa and joined in with the sandwich terns that had migrated back south for the winter, that already bred at Ladies Island, and maybe hung around with those and then came north with those as they were migrating back in spring and joined back in. I think, well, look at it, it could have came straight across either. It's hard to know.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are parallels with that, because often in springtime we get American waders appear with European waders, and it's often thought that those birds may have actually crossed the Atlantic the previous autumn, and they survived the crossing, and then they travel down to Africa with the European waders, and then they just literally follow their migration path because they can't get back to North America. So I suppose there's some validity to that argument.
Yeah, to be fair, I believe that's a theory put forward by Anthony McGeehan in his latest book. I can't think of the name. Sorry, Anthony. But the best example of that I've read about in recent years has been a turtle dove. So, sorry, not a turtle dove. American dove, Brian.
Morning dove. Yeah.
Morning dove. So morning doves are quite an interesting example because of the pattern they have on their back. no two patterns are the same. They're like a fingerprint for an individual bird. And one of these birds was documented doing its migration route, so from up and down essentially, but on the wrong side of the planet. And of course, we could tell it was the same bird, not another vagrant, by the pattern on the back. So that was a pretty good example of that. And the theories put forward by McGeehan, as I said. But
yeah, so just go back to the ID. Yeah, it was finally clinched. Like a couple of people really started to suspect. I remember every single night I was doing hours and hours of reading. I couldn't understand why it was anything other than a Caspian Tern. But my pictures weren't just good enough to get the primary pattern on it. But I think Killian Millarney, a couple of days later, I can't remember the exact date, I think it could have been the next Sunday or even 2 Sundays after, got amazing shots. And you could see that it lacked the hook on the primaries. So like on a sandwich tern, on each primary there's a slight hook, but the Caspian Tern lacks this. And you could see that it was lacking that on the Ladies Island bird. Which,
so all the features kind of lined up for Caspian Tern.
All the features, from the size, the bill, the dark secondary bar, the primaries, and the lack of the hook, just matched Caspian Tern, which is a ridiculous record for Europe. So
a fantastic find,
unbelievable find.
Yeah, so well done, Jim. Fair play, great find. That's the first section of current affairs. Again, we're a little bit out of date with the next bird that we're going to talk about, but it needs to be mentioned as well, and that is the short-tailed shearwater, which when found, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, was considered to be the first for the Western Palearctic. First for basically the entire side of the planet, and again the first for Ireland as well. So the story with this bird, do you mind if I talk a little bit about it, Brian?
Walk away, yeah.
Okay, so the bird was found washed up on a beach in Waterford by Arlo Jack and second birder. Can anyone think of his name? Brian, come on, Brian.
Brian, you have your finger on the
Adrian Allen. Defend the Scots. Yeah.
So Arlo and Adrian found the bird washed up, and to be honest, I might be putting words in their mouth here, but they mightn't have thought too much of it beyond it just being a Manx shearwater. But a Manx shearwater washing up is quite interesting too. So the bird was taken into care. The measurements.
John, I think they might have thought it was a sooty shearwater because short-tailed shearwater and sooty shearwater are very similar.
Apologies. So the bird was taken into care anyway. And measurements were taken, and the lads realised that they could have had something a little bit rarer. I think again they liaised with Killian Millarney on that one, did they, Brian?
I think, as far as I know, a WhatsApp message came through that said the whole identification breakdown. And in recent weeks, Bob Flood's Shearwater's book has come out, and it's very detailed on short-tailed shearwater identification, which will hopefully lead to more North Atlantic records, which it already has pretty much.
Yeah. I could have swore that I read that somebody thought it was an oil Manxie at the start anyway. But
you could be right, I can't really remember, yeah.
So the bird washed up, the lads found it, they took care of it, they took measurements, and subsequently it transpired that it was something a lot rarer. But unfortunately that bird actually passed away. It didn't make it, they couldn't re-release it. But again, much like the brown booby, I understand that the body has been sent to the Natural History Museum as well.
I'm not actually sure, I presume it is, yeah.
Which is some positive coming out of a little bit of negativity there.
I think it shows how in a Western Palearctic context how important Ireland is, right on the particularly for sea watching, and I think we might be hearing about sea watching in the coming weeks. It's sea watching season in Ireland, but it's actually a very common bird. It's the commonest shearwater in the world, short-tailed shearwater. So they nest around New Zealand, Tasmania, Australia. There's 23 million birds in the population. Now you might think that's a lot, but in fact there was a flock, an estimated population in 1798, and they estimated the flock was 100 million birds in one flock of birds. Now they migrate from Australia and Tasmania up to the Arctic Ocean. They're kind of Pacific species, so they travel up there 15,000 kilometers. They travel up to the Arctic. It takes 6 weeks. they spend a couple of months there, and then they travel back to Tasmania and Australia, New Zealand. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of a mutton bird. You might have heard the term. So this was the original mutton bird. So they're actually commercially harvested for food, even to this day in Tasmania. There's 200,000 chicks taken a year from the islands for food. People take them, collect them for food and for oil and for the feathers. So the population is in decline, and there's 50,000 birds a year caught in fishing nets. So, you know, even though it's the commonest shearwater in the world, it just goes to show you that humans are having a huge impact on the population.
Mental. Insane. Those are some impressive statistics, Peter, but I'm more impressed with how quickly you can Google. But only joking. It's shocking to believe that just humans take away at least 250,000 birds a year. That's scandalous. Like, it's really, really bad. But to bring back to the story of the first for the Western Palearctic, it transpired actually that, I suppose you could say that the lads, this bird kind of brought short-tailed shearwater to the fore of people's minds a little bit. And then there was another bird found more recently in France, which at the time was considered to be the second for the Western Palearctic. Am I right?
I can't remember the order. I think it could be. I can't remember, was it the second or the third one?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think it could have been possibly the punk birders might have suggested short-tailed shearwater as a possible vagrant of maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I think there was an Irish claim for short-tailed shearwater, I think off the bridges.
It was off the bridges,
yeah, but it wasn't accepted. It was, I'm not sure if just one birder had it, but there was no photographs. But he was fairly sure he had it. But of course,
I think it was Mike Hoyt and the punk birders. I think, yeah.
Okay, but I think even though they had a good description of the bird, because it's very similar to another species from the southern Atlantic that we get regularly in Ireland called the sooty shearwater, they'd be very similar. You'd have to have really good views or good photographs to separate them. I think once the record was submitted, it was sort of, I think it was probably poo-pooed by everybody because it's so difficult to tell apart, and none had ever been recorded before, that people just thought, oh, don't be daft, you know, that's a silly thing to be claiming. But it just goes to show you, if you persevere and you work hard enough, and it could end up that record might be, you know, reconsidered in light of the fact that there've been birds turned up. So fair play to them.
Yeah, when you mention reconsidering records, you have to feel for the French guys that found that bird, the second bird, in that they had it for, I think they had the title of finding the second ever for the Western Palearctic for the guts of a day, when pictures emerged of a bird from 2015 that actually turned out to usurp both our Irish bird and that French bird and push them on back down the record books. So the first accepted right now is from 2015, and there's some images of that on Twitter.
So it shows you in the last 6 years that there's been 3 at least. So they're probably much more regular.
And there's been a couple of the states. There's been a couple of short-tailed shearwaters, so they're making it up this far at least. So it's just, I think, to clinch one on a sea watch, you'd probably need, I don't know, you'd probably need record shots for the first claim on a sea watch.
Brian, what's the ID features?
They're very similar to sooty shear. So the primary coverts on a sooty shear are paler than the secondary coverts, and that's the opposite then on a short-tailed. So the main kind of clincher, according to Bob Flood, was the bill. So the bill is much smaller, and I think they said it has a cuter look, which how you get that on a sea watch, I don't know. But you probably would need detailed pictures of the underwing coverts and the bill to clinch a short-tailed in off Ireland from a sea watch.
Brian, no better man.
Yeah,
the bridges are off this year, hopefully. Yeah,
very much.
That's the thing. Every sooty shear from now on will just be grilled. You know?
Well, that's the thing. This whole scenario, this whole situation begs the question. You know, are they turning up a little bit more regularly, and we're just not looking for them? You know.
Yeah.
Who knows? So,
but it also just shows just another shearwater recently in Britain. There was a Scopoles or Scopoles. I don't actually know how to pronounce it, but there was one of those seen off Scotland, and then it moved further down to Norfolk. And again, that's purely because of the recent identification book by Bob Flood. So hopefully they'll be picked up more regularly.
Yeah,
as well.
So we're still learning.
Still learning. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Brian, you're heading to the Bridges of Ross, one of the probably the Western Palearctic's best sea watching location.
Probably
in the next few days. What are you hoping to see? How long are you going for?
So myself and Ger Murray are looking at heading to Galley Head on Wednesday, which is the 19th of August. And I think at the moment Friday the 21st is looking very good, and then we're staying then until the 31st. We're moving from there up to the Bridges of Ross, and we're staying with another couple of birders in a house and birding the Bridges of Ross every day. So it'll be a long almost 2 weeks. But if I get Fia's petrel, which is a seabird which breeds in the kind of Spain, Portugal, that kind of area, I'd be a very happy man. They're kind of increasing in records again down to, I suppose, observer awareness maybe. I don't really know why the records are.
I'd say a lot's to do with telescopes. Telescopes are getting much better in the last few years.
Yeah. So they're certainly getting more regular, and I came very, very close to a Fia's petrel in 2017. I just couldn't get on it. That was off Galley Head as well. So I've never wanted to see a bird more. So hopefully this August I'll get one.
Brian, we look forward to see how you get on.
Yeah. I'll update this anyway.
What are your predictions for what are your mad predictions, Brian, for the coming Sea Watch season? What's the
Probably
next
absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
nearly like every other year. I Fia's is the only thing I want to see. I was lucky enough to see Barolo a couple of years ago, so unless it's something utterly mad.
Barolo, is he a Spanish singer, Brian?
No, it's Barolo Shearwater. So myself and John were lucky to see that the 23rd of August in 2018. So
Brian, does Barolo Shearwater have a stonking bill?
Poor John. No, but I know Ger Murray is really hoping to get a Barolo, but we don't need that. So the only other things is maybe, I don't know,
Spanish singer, Peter, seriously.
short tail shear, or I don't know, something bonkers, blackbird albatross, something like that. Yalcoon Shearwater.
That's it. That's
it. The only thing I want to see is Barolo. Who the f- is Barolo like? You can run, you can hide, but you can't escape my love.
Yeah, that's the first time. Speechless. There we go. Folks, thank you very, very much. That's the end of Current Affairs and the end of the second ever episode of Two in the Hand. Next episode 3, we have something very, very special for you. We've already alluded to it in the previous section, but what we're going to be looking at is sea watching. This is sea watching season. We're going to try and bring you a true representation of what sea watching season is like for an avid birder, okay? And we're going to do that by bringing you our longest ever vlog. It'll be 35 seconds longer than the previous one. No, we're aiming for a 20-minute epic vlog. Stay tuned.
Wow.
We hope to see you in the next one. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. You can run, you can hide, but you can't escape our love.
Are we leaving that in?